Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Road to Recycling, a Carton Council podcast. I'm Larine Urbina, the VP of Communications for Carton Council, and I'll be your host for today's episode. So for those who listened to the previous episode of Carton Council Origin Story, you heard about why the Carton Council was formed, as well as our strategy to focus on increasing access to carton recycling by collaborating with all throughout the recycling value chain. So today we'll build on that by digging into how the Carton Council is continuing its work and while we're looking toward the future and how we're working to do that. I'm joined today by three of our current members of the Carton Council leadership team. And just to explain a little bit, our Carton Council leadership team is formed by volunteers from amongst our member companies. So we have two of our member companies represented here today, Tetra Pak and Pact of Evergreen. But Jason Pelz is our first panelist here. If you want to introduce yourself, Jason.
Thanks, Larine. I'm Jason Pelz, VP of Recycling Projects for the Carton Council in North America. I spend most of my time working on developing infrastructure throughout the recycling value chain.
Next up, we have Lynn Dyer, who is our newest member of our leadership team, but comes to us with a lot of experience in the industry. So Lynn, if you could tell us a bit about yourself.
Absolutely. Nice to be here. Thank you. I'm Lynn Dyer. I'm the Vice President of Sustainability and School Recycling for the Carton Council. And I come to us from one of our partner organizations, the Pact of Evergreen. And for Carton Council in particular, I focus on how we can make sure that we're working on our carton recycling in our school systems.
Excellent. And finally, we have Carla Fantoni, who I know has been working on the Carton Council work for quite some time. But Carla, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
So what I do for Carton Council today is oversee our overall strategy and also oversee the engagement plans for Carton Council.
So thank you all for being here today. And of course, we're here to talk about carton recycling. But before we dive into carton recycling, I think it would be helpful to for everyone to understand what we mean when we say food and beverage carton. And primarily, there are two different types of cartons. There's the gable top carton, which is a chilled carton that you might find in the chilled case in your grocery store with milk or juice or something like that inside. Then there's also aseptic or shelf-stable cartons that protect a variety of different types of products, but from milk to juice to broth, pet food, cocktails, wine, a whole lot of things in there. So when we talk about food and beverage cartons in today's episode and what Carton Council focuses on, that's what we're really talking about. So of course, Carton Council was built on this foundation of collaboration across the value chain and working across the value chain to make real difference at all steps. So Carla, since you've been working on this for several years now, would you say that that's still the main focus of what Carton Council does?
Yes, absolutely it does. It's how we started. It's how we work today. So the original members of the Carton Council remain the same as of today, and our mission remains exactly the same. It's very easy to get distracted, and it's very tempting to expand the mission. But the board of Carton Council kept us very focused on the mission of expanding carton recycling. And if you think about it, even the basic strategy and the model on how to achieve that remains the same, right? It's what we call like working the value chain on reverse. So the first step is really making sure that we have recyclers or end markets. And then once we have that, then we become attractive to the MRFs to sort cartons. And that's when we're ready to go talk to the MRFs. Once we have those on board, is the time to go to the municipalities, to the cities, to ask them to include cartons into their recycling programs. And only when all that is in place is then we go to the residents to educate them about carton recycling and also to motivate participation by them. Of course, the basic steps are the same, but how we do them evolved through this many years, right? Either because of external dynamics or because, we learned, we experienced, and we evolved along the time.
Great. So building on what Carla talked about with collaboration with MRFs and communities and so on, Jason, you work a lot with infrastructure and building that infrastructure, and of course collaboration is key there. Can you talk a little bit about how that works for Carton Council?
Sure. So we can't do this alone. I mean, we have to have partners, and the MRFs and the end markets or the recyclers are some of those partners. So the way it works really is for us to, when it comes to the MRFs, really to understand how we can get cartons recycled. So what does it take? And it's very important for us to know what the MRF needs help with, and if there's help that we can even provide them as a as having resources or through infrastructure grants. But again, working collaboratively with them to come up with the best solution. And then the same thing holds true with the end markets as well. With the recyclers, there are people who view this as a very valuable product, but maybe they need a tweak or two at their facility to be able to really use it. So again, how do we work with them specifically to make this happen, to be able to recycle these cartons?
Great. Do you have any examples you can share of specific projects we've worked on?
Yeah, we've worked on a bunch of projects throughout the years that I've been here, and in some cases, it's actually been a situation where we've been on the cutting edge of innovation because we realized that with cartons there are some challenges, and in fact, we were one of the first groups to get engaged with robotic arm sorting with artificial intelligence cameras to do this. We saw it as an opportunity, so we got in on the ground floor. We had a partner MRF at the time and a partner company at the time that we all worked together to really see if it could work, and we've seen a lot of progress with that. So that's an example on the MRF side. For the recycling side, actually one of the coolest things that we've done is also been with a little bit of an alternative technology. You know, traditionally paper mills have been the typical way for cartons to be recycled. And we were approached by a company many years ago about the possibility of taking cartons and turning them into building products. And so again, we got involved with them early on and helped them do some work and helped them do some research, and it's actually become a successful solution. So companies like Continuous Materials, Kelly Green Products now are able to take cartons and turn them into building materials.
Okay, so there are several different carton recyclers, but what can cartons get recycled into?
So cartons can get transformed into a couple of different things. The traditional paper mill recyclers will turn them into tissue, toweling, printing and writing paper, packaging products, even possibly molded pulp. And then on the one where I explained the full carton recycler, where they take the whole carton and press it into boards, that material really goes for building products that you could typically find in roofing structures for big box stores, for example.
And I would say, Jason, just to build on that, selfishly, I think if I think about my history and the work that I did on paper cup recycling, it's important to note that recycled cartons and recycled cups can ultimately end up going back into a recycled fiber that can be put back into that paper cup. So lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
That's really great.
It's cool.
So Lynn, I'd love to hear your perspective on this. So of course you're the newest member of the Carton Council leadership team, but you're no stranger to this work. But what are some of your initial thoughts on the approach since you've joined Carton Council?
So yes, you're right. I am new to the Carton Council, but I would say I've been in awe of the work of the Carton Council for over 10 years. I distinctly remember being in a room and hearing someone from Carton Council talk in 2010. So going that far back and hearing the plan that the organization had put into place. And I would say that at that point, that's when I wanted to take the association I was with at the time, Food Service Packaging Institute, and get them to figure out, hey, how can we be more like Carton Council? How can we take responsibility for our products as we're introducing them into the market? And at the time, you know, Carton Council was just beginning, and Carton Council has made so much tremendous progress over the last 10 plus years. But I think one of the lasting legacies of Carton Council is really going to be blazing that trail for so many other materials and products that we've seen that need to be recycled as they struggle to figure out how can we really improve things. Carton Council has laid out a model of how that can be done. And so I think that's something the Carton Council should be very proud of.
Thank you, Lynn. And I think this has been really great kind of talking about how we've worked and how we continue to work. But Jason, how do we know that what we're doing is driving success?
So for the Carton Council, success is really based on two key targets. One is the growth of household access to carton recycling. So what access means is that a resident has the ability to participate in the recycling of their cartons, so they can put it in their bin if they have a bin, or they can take it to their drop-off if they have a drop-off. And then the second is the recycling rate. We want to see the recycling rate of cartons grow. And by that we mean that the cartons that are collected, sorted, and baled are then sent on to be recycled. And by recycling, I mean transformed into something new. So when we started this back in 2009, 2010, the recycling rate was about 6%. The access rate to households was 18%. And today we sit at 62% for household access and at 20% for the recycling rate. So again, that's a measurement that shows we've made a lot of progress.
Yeah, and I think one point to make on the access rate is 60% was a huge milestone for Carton Council. And that meant that cartons could carry a non-qualified recycling logo, meaning that they're considered a mainstream recyclable. And that happened in 2017. So it's been several years since then. So it's really great that we've continued to build on that progress. Thinking back again to access rate, how do we know what the access rate is? How do we measure that?
So we have a ton of data, and we have a third-party company that actually manages that data. And this is real important to us because this is information we share with customers, this is information we share with other organizations, and so we want to make sure that that data is transparent and it is factual. So back to the company who does it for us, what they do is they regularly monitor the communities. There needs to be a reference either on a website, it could be an announcement that was made, an official announcement, but something that does say that cartons are accepted in the recycling value chain at the community level. They constantly review that on a regular basis. And we do have removals and we have gains. So again, this is a live, real-time thing because again, we want to make sure that we have the most up-to-date data that can be.
Great. So it sounds like it's not just about the MRF accepting it, they have to be talking about that publicly. I don't know, Carla, if you want to talk a little bit about that work.
Yeah, exactly. As Jason mentioned, the key here is to make sure that there has been some sort of external communication to the residents that they can recycle their cartons. So it can be a posting on their website, it can be a press release, it can be flyers that they send to the residents. It doesn't matter what it is, but there has to be some sort of external communication, and that's the only way that we consider that that it has been verified that the access grew.
Right. So I think another important thing to point out is, working transparently and working alongside other organizations with, providing our data to other organizations and so forth. So Jason, if you could talk a little bit about what we've done recently.
Yeah, so we have worked recently with the How to Recycle program and also with the Recycling Partnership. And in both cases, what we did was provided them with data from our database. Because again, it's important that we make sure that they have the proper information to be able to then use their respective logos or their new Recycle Check program, things like that at the Recycling Partnership. So we have to have this regular collaboration.
Yeah, and I think one other important point is that data, that database of household access is what fuels our address locator on the recyclecartons.com website. So that's where any resident in the US can go type in their address and see really what the carton recycling situation is where they live. So that's been an incredibly important tool for us, and we know that a lot of our food and beverage brands that package their products in cartons use that a lot as well.
Yeah, and just to add to that, one of the most important things it does too is it tells us where we need to focus as we go forward. Because there are times where people go on and they don't have household access to carton recycling and they want to recycle their cartons. So as we begin to look for new communities, this helps us do that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that, you touched on the consumer, and I just wanted to add that we also use research to measure our progress. So every 2 to 3 years, we do a consumer research that tells us if consumers understand that they can recycle their cartons in the area where they are located, and also more importantly, if they're doing it. Right? So we have real data and tracking how we are progressing over the years. And I'm very glad to say that, yes, we are progressing and, more and more consumers are becoming aware that cartons are recycled.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. We've seen incredible gains in the access rate and the recycling rate and in the awareness of cartons as a recyclable material. But does that mean that we're letting up or is the foot still on the gas?
Absolutely. The foot is still on the gas, right?
Yeah, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon.
So I think, thinking we have the household access rate, which we've talked a little bit about as far as, growing infrastructure and working across the value chain. But then how do we raise the participation and really get the recycling rate up? So Carla, I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we can do this and how we've been doing this.
It is definitely multi-tier approach where Carton Council does go to consumers directly to educate about carton recycling and again to motivate participation. In many cases, though, we do work directly with the cities, and that can be just by providing resources like toolkits, technical advice, or providing education grants as well. And finally, it's joining forces with organizations that have the same commitment, the same level of efforts that we do, and we join forces to then get to the consumers and drive them to participate.
Okay, great. So I think obviously if we're talking about participation and getting cartons in the bin, schools are a huge opportunity. So I know, Lynn, you've been doing a lot of work with schools, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really exciting because it gives us an opportunity to really reach an audience that can do two things for us. Number one, they can help us increase our recycling rates, which is really critical, but also it helps to educate young minds. So when we think about a student who goes and uses a milk carton in school, they recycle it at home, at school, and then they end up going home, and then they help to repeat that same behavior and help to educate mom and dad that cartons, yes, that you can recycle those as well. So for the schools team that I lead within Carton Council, we have an amazing group of people. They're able to go out and provide grants to schools to help either start or increase different school carton recycling programs, which ultimately helps us to reach some of the goals that we're trying to work on.
Great, and I have to give a shout out to one of our recent episodes of Road to Recycling where we actually focused on a school recycling program in Missoula, Montana. I think it's a great story, so definitely encourage everyone to listen to that episode as well. So I think, hearing from the three of you, we have a whole lot to be proud of. I think the progress we've made is spectacular, but what's next?
A lot more of the same. We still need to grow. We still need to grow household access. We still need to grow the recycling of cartons. We still need to make sure that the consumers are educated that cartons can be recycled, because there's still myths that exist. But really, from my point of view, we have to make sure that we continue to find new places where cartons can be transformed into something new. There's still a lot of MRFs out there, big and small, that don't yet accept cartons, and so we have to get creative in how we can work with some of those that might be a little bit more challenging. So really, the job for me is kind of more of the same, but maybe with a few tweaks in order to be able to make it work as the environment changes.
Great. Lynn, what's your perspective?
So I think one thing that we haven't talked about yet is the fact that when Carton Council started in 2009, it was a voluntary effort. The industry came together to say this is something we really want to do voluntarily. But if we look into the future, it's not necessarily going to be voluntary. It's going to be mandatory, depending on policies that we're starting to see across the United States. So how do we use those policies to help achieve what we all want to achieve, and that's increasing our access rates as well as our recycling rates?
Great. And Carla, what about you?
So in the beginning, I talked about the basic model or strategy for Carton Council, and that has been there from the beginning, and it will continue. As Jason mentioned, it's growing the number of recyclers that can turn cartons into a new product. It is about expanding the access. It is about getting more consumers aware and more consumers participating. But it's getting harder and harder, right? Because through all these many years, pretty much all the low-hanging fruit is gone. So we need to be more innovative in how we tackle the challenges that come across. And also we need to leverage our advocates better, the people who believe in carton recycling and really help us to achieve, what we need to achieve.
So I know we also have some other projects in the works. I'm thinking about the future and working with like-minded organizations. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. One of the things that I think is very cool is what's been created. It's called the Polycoated Paper Alliance, and this is an organization, again, of like-minded folks. But this is not just a Carton Council or the Recycling Partnership. This is brands like Kellogg's or Procter & Gamble. It's groups like Sunoco or companies like Sunoco who all have some kind of polycoated paper product or multiple polycoated paper products, but everybody's trying to figure out how to make this work. How can we collectively work together to do similar to what Carton Council did? How do we find markets where they can be recycled? How do we work within the MRFs to be able to sort and bale them, and then educate the folks to be able to know they can put them in their bin.
And then one final question for you, Jason. So I know expanding the number of carton recyclers is a key goal for Carton Council. So any news on that front?
They're not yet, but close. We are working on it. There's actually been a lot of different, first of all, I'd say type of recyclers. You know, I mentioned earlier you had either traditional paper mills or you have what we'll call a full carton recycler or a manufacturer of a product. There continues to be interest from those folks, and we're making good progress. It just takes time, you know, so I will say more to come, hopefully sooner than later, but be prepared for it.
Well, thank you to the three of you. It's been a really great discussion, and thank you for all your efforts over the years and continuing into the future, and really can't wait to see what the next steps are for Carton Council. And of course, thanks to all of you who tuned in today. I encourage you all to check out our website at recyclecartons.com. There's lots of resources there and a lot more information about the work that we do. And if there's one takeaway I hope you get is that Carton Council is definitely here to help, and we would love the opportunity to work with anyone across the value chain to increase participation and access to carton recycling. Thanks a lot.